everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. On today's show, it's tax time. The Canada Revenue Agency is now accepting returns. In this episode, we're going to be discussing what you need to know when it comes to filing your tax return, as well sharing tips to ensure you're getting your best return. And joining me to talk about this is Daria Askerko, Communications Manager at Canada Revenue Agency. Daria, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon.
Before we get into our main discussion, can you share a little bit about yourself and CRA?
Oh, yes. So my name is Daria Askerko, and I'm a communications manager at the Canada Revenue Agency with the Public Affairs Branch. I'm also a spokesperson for the T1 individual income tax filing season campaign. As we know, as you mentioned, filing season is well underway, and this campaign happens yearly and helps promote tax filing among the Canadian population, as well as financial literacy among target populations, such as, for example, newcomers to Canada.
Well, you're definitely the person to be talking to because, as you said, we are in the middle of tax season. Canada Revenue Agency started to get returns back on February 24th. And if by chance you're wondering about the number of Canadians who file, here's some interesting statistics. So the last tax filing season, Canada Revenue Agency received more than 33 million income tax and benefits returns. Almost 91% of those were filed online. And there were more than 31 million refunds issued, with an average refund of just slightly more than $3,500. So that's obviously a huge number of returns and a lot that CRA has to process. So, which starts with sort of the obvious question, Daria, who is required to file a tax return?
Oh, great question. And thanks for those stats. Good to hear so many people got a refund. So generally, you have to file a return if you worked in Canada to ensure that you have paid the correct amount of income taxes or to claim a refund if applicable. You may also want to file if you were, for example, a student and you studied at the designated educational institution last year, or if you want to apply for benefit and credit payments. We encourage everyone to file whether or not you worked or were a student or had any income, because as I said, you may be eligible for benefit and credit payments regardless of your income. So there is a full list of persons who may be required to file or who may want to file if you go on canada.ca and search who has to file a return.
And what kind of documents is someone going to need to file their tax return?
There are various different documents as well as slips. So, for example, there's the T4, which is most common for salaried or hourly employees. There's also the T4A, which reports self-employment commissions, and also things like registered education savings plan payments, or RESP payments. There's also the T5, which is for investment income, and T3 slips for trusts. As I mentioned previously, students can expect a T2202A tuition slip. This is from the educational institution that shows how much you paid in eligible part-time or full-time tuition fees. There's also the T2201, which is the disability tax credit certificate, one of the more common deductions as well. There's also the T5018, which is for contract payments. So if you are a contractor, you may receive that from the various work that you performed during the year. Also, important to note, receipts to support claims are very good to have in case the CRA does ask to see them. So for claims such as medical expenses, childcare expenses, moving expenses, also charitable donations, make sure that you do have these to support your claim if you're claiming these credits or deductions. And of course, for those who have rental income, it's important to keep record of this income as well as any expenses that you may have incurred for your rental properties throughout the year.
So there's lots of information that individual people are going to need. Now, of course, there is a deadline to filing our tax returns. What is the deadline this year, and why is it important to meet that deadline for filing?
This is one of our favorite questions and a very important one. Thank you for asking. So this year, the deadline for most individuals is April 30th, 2025, to file the tax return and also pay any income tax balance owing. If you file and pay on time, you can avoid late filing penalties, excuse me, as well as interest. However, for self-employed individuals, so either if you're self-employed or your spouse or common law partner, your deadline to file is June 15, 2025. This date falls on a Sunday. So we would consider that your return was filed on time if you send it in via mail or online by the 16th of June, which is the Monday. My apologies. However, just very important, if you do owe, you still have to pay the balance by April 30th, 2025, whether or not you are self-employed or an employed individual.
So I think it's important that people realize that the deadline to file, as well as the deadline to pay what is owing, is April 30th. And so I think if it's a benefit to everyone that you file the return beforehand so that you know exactly what's going to be owed by that April 30th deadline. Now, filing late results in penalties. So Daria, can you talk a little bit about what kind of penalties someone might face if they have a late filing?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So it's good to file on time, even if you cannot pay the full balance by April 30th, because if you file on time, like you mentioned, you can avoid the penalty. So the late filing penalty is 5% of the 2024 income tax balance owing, and then an additional 1% is tacked on for each full month that you file after the due date, so after April 30th, up to a maximum of 12 months. So again, it's important to file on time because you can avoid this late filing penalty.
And for those who are self-employed, the deadline for filing is that June 15th date. However, the payment is still previous to that. The payment is still due April 30th. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So you still have to pay on the 30th of April if you are self-employed or your spouse or common law partner is, but you can file on June 15th your tax return. That's right.
Now, I think it's worth mentioning that if someone is receiving government benefits or credits, pensions, child benefits, these are all tied to filing your tax return on time. Is that right?
Yes, that is all right. So as mentioned, even if you didn't work or didn't have any income, you may depend on benefit and credit payments from the CRA or the government, actually, in general. So you and your spouse and common law partner have to file the return on time, both of you. It's also very important to note. So have to get that return in by April 30th. The reason I say government is because other government departments, for example, Service Canada, also use the income reported on your income tax return to calculate certain payments that you may rely on. For example, the guaranteed income supplement is calculated based on the income that you report on your tax return. So if you do have any sort of, or are expecting any government payment, and to ensure that it's not interrupted in July, we encourage everyone to file on time.
That's really good information. I appreciate that you shared that because that is important to remember. Now, how can people file the returns? Those statistics said that 91% of people last year filed their tax returns electronically or online. How are the other ways, or what other ways can people file their tax returns?
Yeah, so we do encourage everybody to file online because it's the fastest, most secure way to do so. So there's NetFile, which is a popular way that Canadians like to file. You could find NetFile certified tax software on our website, canada.ca. And also there's free software as well that you could use to file your return on your own. I personally use it and it's great. So there's also, for those who may need a little help and who have a low to moderate income situation. There's the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program, which is CVITP for short. And it's basically there are volunteers at community organizations that may be able to help you file your tax return if you have a simple tax situation. And there are clinics all over Canada. And if you want to find one near you, you could look up either CVITP or Free Tax Clinic on canada.ca to find one in your area. You may also file by paper. However, it could take 8 or more weeks to process a paper return. Meanwhile, an online tax return can take as little as 2 weeks to process. And lastly, File My Return is an automated filing service by telephone. This service is by invitation only.
So we have lots of options, and obviously we're taking advantage of the online options as a majority in our population, which is great. I like that you mentioned that it's the fastest, it's the most secure way of doing that. That's really good information. And so, of course, when it comes to filing our taxes, we're all hoping for the same thing, which is either not owing at all or a bonus. We may get a refund, and deductions and credits can maybe help with that. Can you describe what are the difference between deductions and credits?
Oh, definitely. So deduction is something that reduces the amount of your net income before you calculate the tax that you owe on that income. Meanwhile, non-refundable tax credits reduce the amount of tax you owe after the tax owing and the income has already been calculated. Both increase your refund. Deductions are most often associated with expenses. So childcare expenses, moving expenses, union dues are a common one, and also registered retirement savings plans contribution and the new first home savings account contributions. But these are some deductions that you may claim on your income tax return. And then for non-refundable tax credit, there's mentioned previously the disability tax credit, which you may claim for yourself or a dependent. There's also the tuition tax credit. So again, if you did go to a designated educational institution and paid tuition fees, or they were paid on your behalf. Medical expenses are also a non-refundable tax credit, and interest paid on student loans, to name a few.
And with the minute that we have left before we go into break, are there any changes to our taxes this year that we should be aware of?
Yes. So actually, there's a great new service. Instead of waiting on hold and calling, you can chat with a CRA agent in My Account. So if you are registered for My Account, and we do encourage you to register if you have not done so yet, you can do that, and you can ask questions about personal income tax, benefits, payments, everything related to your account, really. Also, very important, the home buyer's plan withdrawal limit increased from $35,000 to $60,000. So this is for withdrawals made after April 16, 2024. And lastly, we've made it much easier to sign up for My Account. So before, you had to wait for a code in the mail to come, which could take up to 2 weeks. But now there's a document verification service where you can upload government issued a valid identification, and you can receive the code or access to My Account really right away. So we do encourage Canadians to register for the CRA My Account.
That's all really good changes, I think, that have been implemented, and I really appreciate you sharing that. And we're going to get into a little bit after the break about more of the resources that are available on the CRA website. We're also going to talk about when should you consider hiring an expert to file your taxes for you. And so Daria is going to share her thoughts on that when Money Matters returns.
This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details. With Canada's sovereignty and economy under threat, this election is a defining moment for the country.
There's so much on the line.
Get to know the candidates running to be your MP and represent your interests in Ottawa. Hear from your local candidates during Rogers TV's coverage of the local campaign. And on election night, Rogers TV delivers the local results. Rogers TV. Watch, learn, vote.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Daria Askerko, Communications Manager at Canada Revenue Agency. And it is tax season in Canada, and Daria has been sharing her advice on filing your return. Before the break, we talked about deductions and credits and some expenses and also some of the changes that have happened this year. And of course, you heard that there's a little bit of things to keep track of. If you're finding yourself struggling when it comes to preparing your taxes, you should know that there are excellent resources on the CRA website to help you. So Daria, can you talk about those resources that the CRA website has available for us?
Oh, yes, great question. Thank you. So there are various resources. We want to empower Canadians to do their taxes on their own if they can, especially if you have a simple tax situation. We have a few pages dedicated to this. So there is Get Ready to Do Your Taxes page on canada.ca, and it has a list of steps that you could follow to file your return. The documents that you need, the different slips, etc., that you might want to get together before you start. There's also a questions and answers about filing your taxes page on canada.ca, which outlines what's new for 2024 and provides answers to common tax questions. We've also got an online course called Learn About Your Taxes, and this can help you, again, learn about personal income tax in Canada. Maybe if you want to, like I said, start filing yourself for the first time, or you're new to Canada and just need a little bit of resources to tackle the tax return. And we've also got a podcast called Taxology. There are a few episodes there that you could listen to. Podcasts are very popular these days among everybody. So if you could throw that on, while you're doing something else, and see if you could find out more about doing your taxes. And as I mentioned before, the Community Volunteer Income Tax Program is a great resource where free tax clinics are available near you that can help you file your tax return if you have a modest income tax situation. So
I'll admit the CRA website has really good resources. I look at it on a fairly regular basis just because of the line of work that I do. But if I can say anything to our viewers, it is definitely worth taking a look at because there is a lot of information there that you can arm yourself with as we head into this tax season. Now, of course, Daria, we know that every tax return is not the same and some can be more complex than others, which perhaps raises the question, when should someone consider hiring a professional to assist with filing their tax return?
That's a great question. And like you said, each tax return really depends on the type of credits you claim, expenses, your income, any dependents you may have. We always recommend, as you mentioned as well, using the resources on canada.ca to file your taxes online using NetFile. There's a great service called Autofill My Return, actually, when you do NetFile, that imports all of the tax slips that are on my account into the tax return. So basically, you wouldn't have to fill in the boxes on your own. We do, however, recommend cross-checking that all the slips have been imported, that you do have all the slips, that they were all on my account. It's always good to double check. Otherwise, it depends on your income tax situation, as you said. There are e-filers available for those who may own a business or have a business or hire someone to keep track of their income tax affairs, and that's definitely something that you could also do. Otherwise, we do recommend keeping good records to file your taxes, because even if you do hire someone, I've heard that they expect you to keep the records and the receipts. So that's always really important, whether or not you're employed, self-employed, or even receiving benefits and credits, because there are times that even those get reviewed as well.
Now, you mentioned there about those who might be self-employed and keeping obviously their accurate books and records as they move forward. Can you share any advice or tips with those of our viewers who may be self-employed?
Yes, certainly. So there are a lot of self-employed or actually gig platform economy workers out there, and there are many common expenses for self-employed individuals that you can use to deduct from your income and pay less taxes or get a refund. So some of these include business insurance, office expenses, professional fees, interest and bank charges, as well as motor vehicle expenses, home office expenses, and lastly, capital cost allowance. So it's important to claim the business portion of these expenses. So for example, the home office, you would have to calculate the room or the portion of your home that you use to conduct your business or work before claiming the amounts. So for example, you would have to calculate if the portion of your home is 10% of the square footage, then you could only deduct 10% of the related expenses. Also, this is very important, as self-employed individuals do have to pay into the Canada Pension Plan, and they have to calculate the amount that they have to pay using Schedule 8. So unlike as an employee, when you're self-employed, you have to remit both the employee and employer portion of CPP contributions.
So that's really good information, especially about the CPP contributions. I really appreciate your advice about that. Now, for those who are self-employed, or maybe they have a side gig in addition to their regular salaried job, would you recommend that those people do reach out to a professional to assist them with their return?
So we always do encourage taxpayers to try and file on their own, even if they are self-employed. Keep track of good records. And something important to note, though, if you do engage a professional or an accountant to file your tax return, you are still primarily responsible for the income tax return. So the onus is on the taxpayer to keep the records and be able to provide all of the information to support their claims. Again, whether or not you hire a professional to do your tax return on your own, the amount of money that you owe or that you may receive as a refund, if applicable, will be the same. So as we say, the only things that are guaranteed in life are death and taxes. So again, if you do owe money or think you may owe, we encourage you to use our online resources to try and file on your own, and also file by April 30th to avoid the late filing penalty.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question, because obviously we're all hoping to at least break even, or as I said before, a bonus, maybe even get a refund from our tax returns. Now, with those who may find themselves in a position where they owe for their personal income tax, obviously Canadians are in a bit of a financial stress at the moment for a number of different factors. Do you have any advice for those who are unable to pay the full amount of what is owed, at least by the deadline?
Yes, for sure. So again, if you do owe and you are not able to pay by April 30th, please do file on time to avoid the late filing penalty. If you do owe, and again, you can't pay the full amount, you can request a payment arrangement to pay the tax debt. So you could set up a payment arrangement by telephone or by using My Account, actually. So you could call the contact center once you do file at 1-800-959-8281 to do that, or you can register for My Account and do it that way as well.
So it's good to know that CRA is willing to work with someone who is in that position where they maybe need to set up a payment arrangement. And being able to do that through the online portal is also an easy way to do that. So that's really good information. Now, for those who maybe are not communicating as much as they should be with CRA, what kind of actions can CRA do to collect on the income tax that's owed?
Well, there are various ways that the CRA can to collect any money owed. So one of the more common ways is that a collections agent would be assigned to the file, and they could call you in order to create the payment arrangement, as previously mentioned. And if you do create the payment arrangement and you pay on time, then generally there would not be any actions. However, it is possible that the next time you receive a refund, if you do owe, that refund could be taken to pay your tax balance owing. Also, certain credit, benefit and credit payments could also be taken in order to pay your tax balance owing. And so those are some of the ways that the CRA is able to get their money back in extreme situations, but this is for much higher balances owing. A lien could be put on your property as well, but this is less common. Thankfully, most Canadians are very tax compliant.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that keeping that communication open is really important. And so keeping in touch with CRA, setting up that repayment plan if necessary, being aware that perhaps a future tax refund may be taken to sort of offset what's owing. All of that, I think, is important to know, and I'm glad that our viewers are able to realize that information. So I really appreciate that, Daria. So as we wrap up the show, do you have any final thoughts for our viewers that you can share?
Yes, for sure. We encourage everyone to file now and online, and as soon as possible. Also, make sure that your information, personal information, is correct with the CRA. For example, direct deposit, marital status, address, very important to keep up to date. If you did change this information with another government department, again, for example, like Service Canada, it has not been changed with the CRA. You do have to do the rounds and change it all the different places in order for it to be updated. So that's something you can do either by calling the contact center or using my account to update the information. And other than that, April 30th is a great date to keep in mind to file your taxes and pay any taxes that you owe.
Well, Daria, thank you so much for the information that you were able to give us today. I think it was very helpful for our viewers. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.